Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is another off-season episode of the Rosinbaggers podcast brought to you by Backyard Sports. Ty, talk to me, bud. Spring training's going on. We're talking Annalise this week. What's got you worked up? World Baseball Classic?
World Baseball Classic, sure. Go USA. Adam Wainwright going to be on the bump for game number one for the red, white, and blue. I'll be honest with you. I think it's a lot of everybody else versus Puerto Rico at the World Baseball Classic. I think we're going to find out just really how star-studded that lineup is when they blow away the competition by 13 runs or so. New background, as you see here at the office. I got an office with a view now outside gazing at Busch Stadium in the sunshine in an April 2006 day. It's a hell of a lot better than if I actually opened up the curtains behind me and you saw a glaze of glass, because we live in Nebraska and there's freezing rain, and it's, we're trying to get excited and talk baseball. And yet, I still live in a state where the wind hurts your face on a daily basis. And it's like, no, we're still going to give you freezing rain until July. So enjoy that. What else? How the fuck dare you, Jim Boeheim, for trying to trump on our day? Wednesday is our day. You save your news. You retire on Thursday. I don't give a shit about college basketball right now because we're talking baseball. An NL East preview, which means we break out this little prop, which is a World Series trophy that the Philadelphia Phillies almost had, but then it went away last year thanks to the Houston Astros. Will they be back in October? Or did the rest of the division get incredibly better and the Phillies stayed the same? We're going to find out on the pod.
Yeah, for sure. Boeheim retiring. I have to say, I am a Syracuse basketball fan. I don't have a lot of collegiate allegiance, but I do root for Syracuse basketball. So, to a legend, to one of the best of his time, congratulations on your walk into the sunset. It was an tough loss today to end the career. And if they had been able to beat Wake, they had the lead at the half, then he wouldn't have been able to steal our day. But he went ahead and did so anyway. But you're absolutely right. Puerto Rico, juggernaut, absolute juggernaut at the World Baseball Classic. It's hard for me to look at the matchups and look at kind of the composition of the teams and think that Puerto Rico's not just going to kind of sweep their way through the World Baseball Classic. Now, I know baseball is obviously why we love it. It is one of those sports that on any day anybody could go down, but God, that team is just filthy, filthy. So, so let's jump right into it. NL East had the representative in the World Series last year. It's probably not the team that most people would have picked. I think at the end of the season with the Braves and the Mets kind of running away, making it a two-horse race in the NL East, and the Phillies literally sneaking into the playoffs as a wild card, really down to the last couple of days of the season, it didn't look really good for them to even get into the playoffs. And of course, they get hot when it matters, and we've seen this from other teams. We see it in other sports too, right? It's like having a hot goaltender. Philly just seemed to have really good pitching when it mattered, really clutch bullpen pitching. It wasn't their strength throughout the season. Timely hitting. Bryce Harper out here giving out secrets that now they're trying to say wasn't a secret, but you're not going to convince me otherwise. Tipping pitches. Let's hop in. Dad, good to see you. Go Braves, right? Go Braves.
Braves.
Thanks for joining the show. Let's start from the bottom, and I'll get this one out of the way. Let's tear the Band-Aid off. We have a Nats fan in the building, and I made this one very custom to my heart in terms of the overlay. This is not indicative of their offseason one bit, because the only offseason move they made was Nelson Cruz, their top left or middle left of the slide itself, but top left of the guys who have departed. And on the right-hand side, it's all about the youth. It's all about rebuilding this farm system. It's all about finishing in last place every fucking year so we can draft at the top of the draft and try to fill up the farm system with as many wonderful prospects as possible and maybe recapture some of what we had in the mid 2000s to early 2010s with all those draft picks, which then culminated in a World Series. But I want to highlight a little bit on the left-hand side here. Look, just the star power that has the part. And this isn't the entire list, right? This is just the heavy hitters. Juan Soto, he's in San Diego now. Trey Turner, he's in Philly. Bryce Harper, he's in Philly. Trey Turner in Philly by way of LA. Scherzer in New York by way of LA. It is depressing it was depressing making that slide and understanding that this off season there was some rumors that the team would be sold, and nothing happened. Nothing came of it. And we continue to operate with this huge media market, and just these kind of just clamps continue to be put on the general manager, and it hurts. It hurts because we've lost some incredible talent. Like, you could build a World Series team with the team people we've lost, essentially, and now we're stuck with Steven Strasburg, who can't get healthy. And I will admit, wonderful guy during the World Series run, but probably will never see the mound again. So I'm going to pass it your way now that I've gotten my depressing diatribe out of the way. What are your thoughts about the Nats? Is there any hope this year?
Here's my thoughts on Washington, and I sympathize with the Washington fan base, very similar to how I sympathize with Kansas City fan base, which is essentially 1 in every 3 people here in the Midwest is a Kansas City fan, and it's very similar. And in fact, at times you can copy and paste when you take a look at the left hand side and all the players that go through the system. And I go back to a scorecard that I did back in the early 2000s at a Kansas City game, and it was Beltran and Jermaine Dye and Johnny Damon. That was the outfield, and now obviously that was the outfield before they all 3 hit their stride in their major league career. But those were original Royals, and those transitions and the path to a World Series trophy for these particular clubs that go through, and because I don't even want to say market size at this point, and we've kind of ripped that myth to shred about market size. It's all about if you've got an owner at a club that wants to spend some money for the fans, for his product, or do you have somebody that wants to put some extra cash in their pockets? And I think what you're seeing is very similar to an Anaheim scenario, a Washington scenario, a Kansas City scenario, and your market size is fine. There's no problem with it. But it's rebuilding through this approach of trying to catch fire with a budget baseball team, and it was a thing and the problem with it is it was the Nationals were somewhat successful with it in their World Series run. So at some point that gets management to think, oh, that process worked. Let's try that again. And you gut the system, you go through the rebuilds. It's painful as fuck for the fan base, and I sympathize. And that being said, no, I'm not going to sprinkle some fairy dust over the top of your head and wave a magic wand and pretend everything's going to be okay here. We're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. Washington is what they are, and they're a team going through a rebuild right now. A rebuild with some exciting pieces that will keep the fan base mildly entertained through the course of a summer, but you're going to be paying attention to the rest of the NL East and the rest of this race. There's no doubt in my mind. And it could be a race that's done and dusted by the home run derby at this point. CJ Abrams is an exciting, young, talented shortstop that he's got that electrifying aura about him. I'm still really high on Mackenzie Gore, but let's say early returns have left a lot more questions than they've left explanation points for him in spring ball. Now, again, you have to bring that also into the fact that he is pitching for a struggling baseball team, and the run support is not going to be there. So any idea that Mackenzie Gore is going to come out and win an NL Cy Young, we need to pull the reins back a little bit here and let's let him pitch. One of the pieces, just a baseball guy. I'm just excited to see him land in a starting 9 because we didn't have a spot for him. That's Corey Dickerson, aka Dick Bomb, because that's all he does is hit big bombs out of the yard. I like him on the Washington lineup. You got a couple former Cardinal outfielders in there with Lane Thomas in there too. These are guys that were hanging around in our system that when you got guys like Lars Nootbaar and Tyler O'Neill and some of the other guys, where are you going to put these guys? Dick Baum belongs in a starting lineup. I'm stoked to see him. Candelario from Detroit was an exciting player. I don't know if he's on the downhill slope of his career at this point, but certainly serviceable. But it is what it is, and what it is a team that's probably going to lose triple-digit games. So give me Washington to again hang in the cellar. And your rebuild, it's not like a Pittsburgh rebuild. This is what does not excite me about Washington. It's not your Pittsburgh rebuild. It's not a KC rebuild situation or a Baltimore. This is a little bit longer of a process, and this is going to drag out longer than I think the fan base is even willing to admit from the Washington perspective. This one's going to be ugly for a while. And until that time, Washington's going to hang out in the cellar of the National League East, and that's where I've got them. Triple-digit losses for me. Let's save you a little face and say 60.
Yeah, you're much more bullish on them than I am.
I know.
This is a team that's going to struggle to win 50 games this year, honestly. I look at the roster, I look at the composition. I know that they're going to be pushing as many games for guys that aren't ready for the major leagues, but they want to get them some early exposure. Mm-hmm. Going to struggle. And there are some young, exciting pieces, but they are 2 years in some cases and 4 years in other cases from being parts of a winning major league franchise, in my opinion, basically across the board in that farm system. I love Brady House. He's 2 to 3 years away. I love De La Cruz. He's 2 years away. Elijah Green is probably 2 to 4 years away. I mean, big time prospects. Don't get me wrong. And you mentioned Mackenzie Gore. They've got a couple of young guys in the farm system pitching, and Keibert Ruiz, I think, has an opportunity to grow into a solid major league backstop. I just wonder if we're going to see a situation like we see often with Kansas City, like we used to see with Baltimore, where you're waiting for these pieces to grow, but they don't all mature at the same time. And then you get to the point where one becomes trade bait, and it's, oh, let's try to reload and wait for the other guys to catch up. It's frustrating. And I feel like this is a situation where we're going to see potentially from the Nats, basically when they came back to Major League Baseball, until, Zim and Strasburg and all these guys were ready to go, and Bryce Harper, and they finally got a nice mix of guys that were ready to go. It took a long time. I mean, we're talking 12 years, 15 years. I think we're in the midst of possibly 8 years to a dozen years of pretty depressing baseball in Washington. And I'm sincere when I say I think 51 is what I think they're going to win, and 53 is their ceiling, honestly.
It's shitty. And it's the first time that we've actually talked about a rebuild from a fan that's actually going through a rebuild in baseball, because baseball works a little bit. Yes, I'm going through some of the pains right now on the ice with my St. Louis Blues as they're going, but it's a completely different animal when we're talking, because hockey, you can rebuild and turn around on the fly in a year with one draft class. You can't do that in baseball. And no fan base anywhere in any sport should ever have to utter the words, and this is where baseball needs to figure it out from a competitive balance standpoint, because there isn't a fan base alive that should have to utter the words, "Oh God, I hope he does good, but not too good, so that we trade him at the trade deadline and go through this entire process again." You shouldn't have to put restraints and put a barrier on the success of your baseball team. But I feel like from the national standpoint, and a few of the others that we've named, they have that general feeling when they're guys on the hill. I mean, when Mackenzie Gore comes out and he wins his first 5 starts, you're probably thinking, well, shit, there he's going to go. You shouldn't have to endure that from a fan base standpoint. And I wish that all owners would have a competitive bone in their ass to go out and spend a little money and put a quality product on the field for the fans. I mean, it should be cutthroat monopoly baseball out there, but it's not. And it's all the different styles. And that's, I've always felt, from the ownership standpoint, you got to be a fan of the game. You got to be a fan of your franchise first, and then a businessman later.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's shift gears to a little less depressing franchise who feels like they're kind of on the upswing. Made a couple of moves this offseason that I think are going to help them round out the roster. Health was a big issue for them last year. If they can stay healthy this year, this team's going to be exciting. And they've got a lot of guys in waiting down there in the minor league system, and guys they're starting to pull up to the major leagues this year that could be very exciting for them. Still loaded in their farm system. It's not the greatest farm system, but it is pretty top heavy when it comes to Miami. But you look at Jazz there in the middle. I know you're a big fan. Don't want to steal any thunder there, but they added Johnny Cueto. And it looks like they're starting to kind of round out the roster here. What do you think about the Marlins this coming year?
We say this about Miami, I think we do it kind of to a fault, because this is a baseball franchise that always seems to, in the preseason, pique an interest a little bit and move the meter in terms of their location and their new stadium, a fan base that, or excuse me, a franchise that seems to work its way perfectly in about the span of an 8-year intermittent cycle, where they'll go off and they'll make another run at it. This to me is the beginning of the ingredients to that here with this Miami roster. And you mentioned a little bit about Jazz Chisholm, and I think really from the Marlins perspective, it starts with Jazz, and he's an exciting, flashy player. He's the cover athlete on MLB The Show. You take a look at what he did a year ago, and again, these numbers, let's just keep in mind, he played half the season hurt and spent the second half of the season with a lengthy stay on the disabled list. So his slash line was incredible: 248, 303, 425, 18 home runs, 23 bags knotted. The dude is just 100% flash, and his upside is only getting better at the plate in terms of the work that he did in the spring. We've already seen some of that on display, especially in the batting cages. It just looks like he has really found a way to elevate that baseball. And so baseballs beware. This guy could be due for a 30 home run game. Cover Jinx Williams on the show. Is it?
It's not as much in baseball.
Not nearly as much as prevalent, unless you're a fan of David Wright, whose career went down the tubes after being an MLB The Show cover athlete. I don't know. I love me some Jazz Chisholm.
It's not Madden, right?
Right. Not Madden that we're talking about. But back on the Marlins, you mentioned some of the big additions in the offseason, right? Soler is huge for me, and he was huge for me in Kansas City. He had a really a resurgent, very short time in Atlanta, but his time was very impactful in what he does at the plate. And what he does at the plate, he hits bombs, monster shots, provides a little bit of pop in a lineup that, quite frankly, when the stars for the Marlins were out last year, that lineup was toothless. There was no Garrett Cooper in the second half of the season. There was no Jazz Chisholm, and then they just didn't have enough bats to stay competitive, especially in an NL East that was just accelerating with the way Philadelphia and Atlanta and New York all played ball. So yeah, Miami's an exciting baseball team, I think, to watch. One of the names that's not being thrown around when it comes to throwing things around in pitching. See what I did there? Now, we've talked about Sandy Alcantara, and we talked about him last year ad nauseum, right? Cy Young, the dude is likely going to be my candidate again this year in the National League. But here's a name that's not been flashy, and that's Trevor Rogers. Trevor Rogers is a huge piece of this starting rotation because of his strikeout ability. The ball just misses a lot of bats when Rogers is on the hill. And it's not as if he's got this just electric stuff. I think he reminds me a lot of an Adam Wainwright style with his approach and the way he goes out to the mound, where it's not as if I'm just going to go back and hurl this baby as hard as I can for 105 pitches and see where we end up. He goes out to the mound, he attacks, he pitches, and it is tactical. He's a great former first round pick that is only on the rise in terms of his metrics and in terms of where he's coming from in the career. Like, I don't think he's going in the downhill direction in terms of his career progression. So I'm really excited to see where he lands in the middle of this rotation. He has all the intangibles of not being a 1B, but being a solid 2 in Miami, and certainly being some guy where you have a great performance from Alcantara. And how many times did we see this last year with Miami? You'd get that great performance and a 5-0 victory for the Marlins, and then they turn around and then you blanked 11-2 in the next game. It's like, Jesus Christ. I think they'll improve drastically from where they were at a year ago. So much so that I have them accelerating and moving into the 3 spot. Marlins with a nice round 82 for me.
Ooh, above
Miami,
500. Okay.
impressive season.
I like it. I like it. So Eric, yeah, we're gonna talk about the Mets. We're gonna talk about the Mets. We'll see. And yeah, my dad asked if they can compete for the top spot. I don't know that that's the ceiling they're aiming for, but I think second or third in this division, if they can compete for a wild card spot, especially, that's going to be huge for them. If they're within any sort of striking distance of the wild card in September, I think it's going to be a win for them this year. And I'm gonna yell about Spotrac for a minute here. They don't even have Jorge Soler on Miami's free agent acquisition, so I'm mad about that. I remembered it as soon as you said it. I remembered it, but when I was looking at Spotrac earlier to build the overlay there, I'm sorry, Jorge Soler. I did not mean to leave you off of that. But it is a huge acquisition for them in the middle of their lineup. Go ahead.
Absolutely. One I did miss on the acquisition, Garcia. Avisail Garcia also providing some pop.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, that middle of the lineup starts to get a little more pop, a little more juice, a little more excitement there. And if you've got Jazz on the base paths creating havoc at the top of the lineup, there were times last year when he was batting cleanup for that. And as much as he does have pop, he's much better suited to be up there at the top of the lineup, 1-2 in the order, and creating havoc on the base paths. He hits you a leadoff home run. He hits you a leadoff home run, but he's so exciting on the bases that you want him there. They solidified the middle infield a bit too, with their offseason acquisitions. Gene Segura, nice utility guy who can provide them some innings, throughout the year. I do like Miami. I like their rotation mostly. You mentioned Rogers. I think hit another year under his belt. I think we're going to see him become a real number 2, number 3 guy. Johnny Cueto's a proven commodity, not the fireballer he once was, not the guy that was good, competing for Cy Young awards, but he's a guy that if you're slotting him in as your number 2 behind Sandy Alcantara, I think you've got a real good shot at having a pretty deep rotation. And it also allows you, in my opinion, to put Jesus Luzardo in a position that he could be more successful as the 4th guy in your rotation, maybe even 5th guy in your rotation, where you might start to see a little bit of what they thought they possibly could have had with him in Oakland, where there was some talk that Rookie of the Year wasn't out of the realm of possibility for him when he was in Oakland. Never came to fruition, never materialized. But that rotation starts to get longer. Edward Cabrera is another name that maybe a spot start, or if he puts himself in the rotation, Zardo into the relief spot, maybe he could thrive there. I do like what they're doing. I like what they've done. It's not often that I say this about the Marlins, but moves they made outside of their own organization were pretty sexy to me in an off season. I'm with you. I'm a little higher than you. I'm actually going to bump them up to about 83, and I'm going to put their ceiling at 85 wins. I don't know that gets them a wild card, but I do think that means that the Marlins are playing meaningful baseball in September for the first time in a long time. I don't know that that's going to move them up to 3rd, though. I think I have them still in 4th in the NL East. I'm contemplating flip-flopping one now, but I'm going to stick with it. Marlins 4th place with 83 wins. This division's going to be fucking nuts this year.
It is at an 83 win team at 4th. For the good of baseball, my God, I want to see Miami get into a wild card because I think that Jazz Chisholm in the spotlight, and I think Sandy Alcantara in the spotlight, I think is very sexy, very palatable, and I also think puts everybody else in the National League on high alert because I think that is a hell of a tough out in a 5-game series.
Yeah, imagine facing Sandy Alcantara in the playoffs. Yeah, no fun. Just chalk up game 1, and we'll worry about game 2. All right, let's move up the standings, and let's talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. Last year, finished 3rd in the division, snuck into a wild card spot, and got hot, ended up in the World Series, and lost to the Houston Astros in the World Series, and it was an eventful offseason for them. A lot of pieces out, a lot of pieces in. Pitching rotation is almost a whole new look this year. They add Trey Turner to the middle infield. Bryce Harper's on the shelf for likely the first half of the season. We'll probably see him around the All-Star break. I'm curious to hear your thoughts here, because you're talking about losing a few guys that made your rotation long, but then adding potentially a couple pieces that could make your rotation better. What are your thoughts?
They had this World Series trophy last year in their grips, and they lost it. And then they had a high place in the National League East, and then they lost it in the offseason for me. Philadelphia is going to go backwards, and it's not because of the offense. The offense numbers and lineup looks to be, if not better, than where it was at a year ago when they snuck in and knocked out St. Louis. I know that very well. Watched it happen. Wasn't fun. Offense looks solid again with the addition of Trey Turner coming into this lineup, and Schwartz just hitting bombs, and Hoskins. Kids still got it. But like you mentioned, the biggest question mark for me is this essentially line change, a hockey style line change in terms of the pitching staff and in terms of the starting rotation. And other than Aaron Nola, how does this unit mesh together collectively as a baseball team, and how this clubhouse will come together is going to be a focal point and a big question mark moving forward. And I think that's awfully hard to gel through the course of just one off season together. I just don't. I look at the pitching staff standpoint, and I know Aaron Nola is a god on the mound. The guy just brings it, and he is going to be the one. He is going to be the ace. And after that is where things get shaky and things get a little wobbly, and where I really start to scratch my head and say, is there a 10-game winner in here between Wheels and between Walker and Suarez, and question mark on the 5. I try whoever you want out. I don't think the pitching is going to be able to stay competitive in a division that is so offensively top heavy and so dangerous like the NL East. I see the Phillies taking a significant step back from their World Series run, where they were at a year ago, and going below the old slash line here. Below 500, just by one game for Philadelphia, and sliding in fourth.
You know what?
Did I convince you? Did I do it?
You did it. You did it, because it was the team I was going to flip-flop with Miami, all right?
I know.
So I'm actually going to bump Miami up 2 wins. I'm going to say 85 is their number. And I'm going to say that might get them into a wild card spot. And I'm going to bump the Phillies back. I had them at 86. I'm actually going to bump them back. We'll say 6 wins. I'm going to go 80 wins for them. And here's why. Because leading up to the show, I had convinced myself that Taijuan Walker was going to be good for them. I had convinced myself that the loss of Kyle Gibson and the loss of the guys that were stalwarts in that rotation wasn't going to be a big deal. And I had kind of convinced myself to forget about the fact that prior to September 15th, that bullpen was a fucking shit show.
Train wreck.
Shit show. Absolute shit show. Train wreck is the perfect way to put it. So, yes, you convinced me. Plus, I don't think I gave enough credit to the fact that they're going to be without Bryce Harper for about 75 to 90 games this year.
Lengthy time.
That's a big deal. So I'm with you. I'm going to say 80 wins, and I'm going to stick with. I'm going to flip flop, because I spent the last 3 days wondering whether or not I was going to put Miami above Philly this year, and I'm doing it. I'm doing it. You made a good argument. My hat's off to you, sir. You convinced me.
Whatever you do, though, like, for God's sakes, man, because this is the second time in 3 pods where I've convinced you to switch on a previous point you've made.
You know when I'm teetering. You just
Don't
won't.
listen. Don't listen to me and take my advice to the sports book, because my God, if you look at my bank statement from this past season and fall,
That's fair.
and moving towards spring, it ain't good. And my predictions typically are horrible, and they go incredibly wrong. And so, actually, for the listening audience, go ahead, throw money on Philadelphia to make the playoffs. They'll be fine. We're just sounding the alarm and pressing the panic button for a franchise that I truly despise, anything Philadelphia. And so, any opportunity that I get to throw them into the back of the NL East pack, I'm doing it.
That's
less than 77 for Philadelphia.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let's see.
36. That's a perfect number for him.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, the Mets, and big offseason news for the Mets, right? When healthy, the best pitcher in baseball departs. When healthy is a big, big caveat for him, because that's about 30% of the time when he's healthy. But he is the best pitcher in baseball. But they lost Chris Bassett and they lost Taijuan Walker. And they add Justin Verlander, who's a known commodity, but that may negate one of those three that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
They bring a guy over from Japan who throws what they call a ghost pitch. It's a fork ball, and it's okay. What's going on here with the Mets? Are they going to win 100 games again?
No, not 100, not triple digits. Not
They're
the
going to win 90.
Not the team that finds a way more often than not to fall flat on their face. Yeah, I think the Mets did given what happened to that franchise and the players that were departing and the pieces that they had to put together, I think they did the best job possible. These international players are always sort of a big question mark. The Ichiros are a needle in a haystack. Yeah. You're gonna get one, but then you're gonna have guys like
Ichiro and Shohei. Right. There's 20 guys that end up back in the.
There's a Seiya Suzuki who are they're fine baseball players, but they don't come in and they don't set the world ablaze, right?
I love the stab at the Cubs too.
Yeah, well, I know
we need them.
we got Stove, we got Williams, who's apparently chiming in on today's show, and he's a big Cubs backer. So any chance we can put them down, we will. Listen, I'm gonna stop bashing on Justin Verlander. At some point in my radio and podcasting career, when talking baseball, I'm gonna say that what. Maybe Justin Verlander is just a pretty damn good pitcher, and I got to stop saying that this is going to be his final year, or this is going to be the year where his mechanics start to finally fade, because it doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened yet. He is a carbon copy paste of a Tom Brady style player who just does not fall apart, who continues to go out in big situations and in the biggest moments have the games of his career. He did it a year ago. I have no doubt he'll do that in New York. And it's a guy now who's been in the league long enough, who has been the face of the franchise for long enough, who is totally not going to get starstruck by the New York City Lights, where I think if you take a Justin Verlander at 23, 25 years old, and he goes into the New York market, I think that it can sidetrack a career if you're not careful in how you approach it. He's not. He's just gonna go be Justin V, and he's just gonna go throw up some more Ks.
He's a businessman
in his dad's career, right? Lindor, Alonso at that 3-4 lineup. That's heavy. But the rest of the lineup for me. It's a little shaky. Dan Vogelbach, I remember him as a Pittsburgh Pirate. God, he hits home runs if he can get a hold of one, but he's going to strike out. He's going to strike out
the ball with the barrel of the bat.
Exactly. Going to have more strikeouts than he's going to have anything else. The other names just don't. Eduardo Escobar is a solid player, and he's going to continue to be a solid player. Nimmo has always seemed to go above and beyond my expectations as a baseball player, and maybe I need to stop bashing him a little bit too. I love the management style here. The pitching rotation has got some question marks. I don't think they're near as deep, which makes me think that they're not going to be as good. the Mets are still going to be a solid baseball team. Don't get me wrong, but I think anybody in the New York media who wants to go ahead and make the Subway Series a potential reality for a World Series is going to have to take down about 10% there, Squirrely Dan, because I just don't see it happening. Mets, not 100, not even 90s for me. A solid second place finish in the division, however, let's say high 80s at 89.
I like it. So this is the one that I think could fall to pieces.
Sure.
Honestly, I think.
In fact, I thought you were actually going to put the Mets and flip flop the Mets instead of the Phillies. I thought that's where you were going to go.
I almost went super bold.
Yeah, that would be huge.
I almost went super bold. There was a time when I was preparing for this show that I had the Marlins in second place in this division. Honestly, there was a time when I had the Marlins in second place.
I want it.
I look at this lineup and it's like two guys and a bunch of meh. And I look at this rotation and it's two guys and a bunch of meh. And then I look at the bullpen and it's two guys and a bunch of meh. And then the one guy, right, Timmy Trumpet there,
yes,
he has a track record of a time in his career when he wasn't that good. He couldn't miss bats. He couldn't get guys out. So I just look at this team and I say, I'm going to put them in second place, but I think this Mets team could be a fourth place team. Honestly, the reality could be that this could be a 72 to 75 win team if they don't capture some of the same magic they captured last year. I feel the same way about this team as I did about the Yankees last year. I really like Scherzer and Verlander at the top of that rotation. I like their locker room presence. And I don't think they're going to let that team fall apart the way that I think the Yankees are going to fall apart. Because we already previewed the AL East, and I had them falling a precipitous amount. I don't have the Mets falling as much. I have them in second place, but I have the Marlins sniffing them all the way to the end of September. Now that I've flip-flopped Philly, I had Philly sniffing, but now I've got the Marlins sniffing the Mets all the way to the end of September. Mets finishing in second place. You said 89. I'm at about 80. We'll say 86, 87. They're not going to clinch the higher wild card over the Marlins until maybe the last day of the season even.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And all of this, two players, I love this, right? Because we just got done doing the Nationals preview. And we got the Nationals fan who just got done doing the Nationals preview and was like talking about an 86 win baseball team and going, two players and meh. And I'm thinking, meh. Like, you would take meh in a heartbeat.
I would take meh in a heartbeat. Absolutely. I would 100% take 86 wins and a bunch of meh in a heartbeat. All right, so I want to take a pause real quick before we get to the last team here, and obviously it's a giveaway that we've got the Braves winning the division for a second year in a row here. Let's take a pause. Let's do our salute to service, brought to you by Folds of Honor. All right, this week's episode goes out to Air Force Senior Airman Jason Kai Fan. Died September 12th, 2020, serving during Operation Inherent Resolve. At the time of his death, Senior Airman Fan was 26, hailing out of Anaheim, California. He was stationed at Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait. He was assigned to the 66th Security Forces Squadron at Hanscom Air Force Base. Air Force Senior Airman Jason Kai Fan, we have the watch. All right, so let's talk Atlanta Braves, and I know my dad's excited about this. He was talking to me a little bit before the show about it. He's a big Braves fan. We've clearly got the Braves finishing in first place. I'm really curious because they didn't make a lot of moves this offseason, right? Most of the moves they made were last season, at the end of the season, locking up Michael Harris, locking up Vaughn Grissom. They've got Acuna locked up. They've got Albies locked up. Riley was moonshots last year. Strider's going to be healthy again this year. On down the line, right? Let's just keep saying the names as we go here, Matt. I didn't even mention Matt Olson yet. Didn't even mention, the monster at first base that he became throughout that season after pressing for the first 6 weeks of the year, it seemed. What are your thoughts on the Braves, Ty?
Here's my thoughts on Atlanta. Fucking well done for probably the best franchise front office wise in baseball right now. If we're power ranking front offices, Atlanta is at the top, and I don't know who's second because they are that far away from the rest of the field. I wasn't obviously old enough to recall or remember or gather a lot of information and intel as to what led to the dynasty that was the mid-90s for the Atlanta Braves. I don't know all of the ingredients that came together to make that a reality other than Greg Maddux coming over from Chicago to Atlanta to be just a dominant pitcher. This feels a lot like the beginning of a dynasty for the Atlanta Braves. You mentioned that they didn't make a lot of moves. And so far, to this point on this pod, while we've previewed baseball teams, the teams that have not made a lot of moves in the offseason and in the winter meetings are teams that were sliding all the way back into the 4 and the 5 spot. We've got a little bit of an opposite scenario here with Atlanta. They didn't make a lot of moves because their front office kind of took a gander at things and said, we don't have to. We've got a World Series team right now as stands, as built. And here is what I love about the front office and this management, because they take a carbon copy out of the way I used to coach baseball, which is if I got kids doing the right thing, doing it the right way, my job is to stay the hell out of the way and let them do their thing. And there was a season where minimal tinkering with things from me. And I just let them show up and go to work. And I'm honest to God, what a job for the skipper here for Atlanta. You get to show up and you go to the dugout and your only job is don't fuck it up.
Don't fuck it up.
It can't be that hard. Injuries are a concern with Atlanta. And they have been, because this is not a team that has stayed 100% healthy. Acuna's had his battles with injuries. Ozzy Albies, who is going to be the heir apparent to Dansby Swanson in the middle infield, and who I really, really have a lot of high praise for, has not been healthy. God, Michael Harris is such a good rookie. You look at what Michael Harris did, and you think of some of the young guns and Bobby Witt Jr. and Julio Rodriguez and these guys that got all the praise. Michael Harris is so damn good, but he's like the 7th best hitter on Atlanta. So he doesn't shine as brightly because he's literally sitting in the middle of a lineup that is just so damn stacked. It's not even funny. The pitching rotation is Maddux, Smoltz, Steve Avery, the other guy that I can't think of off the top, Tom Glavine. It's got that sort of vibe to it with Maxey and Wright and Morton and Strider, who's got the sweet stash and the sweet slider. This is a fun baseball team. I can't lie to you enough how unfair of an advantage the National League will be this year. As a fan of the St. Louis Cardinals, who are in the National League, who will have to at some point go toe-to-toe with the Braves, I can't tell you how scared I am of doing that and how much I don't want to see what that scoreboard will be. In today's game of an accelerated baseball contest without defensive shifts to get your guys out, they could stay at the plate forever. I don't know if they'll ever get off. They're fun. Lo and behold, they're fun. The only bold question I have for the Atlanta Braves is, first of all, are we going to see one of these? It's really hard to do on a green screen, by the way. Yeah. We're going to see one of these, or are we going to see number 116? Atlanta's got all the tools and the intangibles to make a hell of a run at it. Give me not only triple digits for Atlanta, not only an NL East pennant, but give me 110, falling just a skosh short because after trying twice last year, I'm too damn scared to say it on the pod. 110 for Atlanta, hell of a year. Braves fans, if you stay healthy, it's going to be a fun watch.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And just real quick before I get into my lavish praise for the Braves as well. Braves have been a little up and down preseason, spring training, but honestly, they're trying pieces. I don't think they have any worries in their lineup, so that's a nice luxury, as you put it, right? A nice luxury to have as a GM, as a skipper, to just be able to say, maybe I want to try the young guys today. Maybe I want to throw this guy 2 innings instead of 4, right? So,
and I'll say this about the spring training play. When St. Louis won their last World Series, I think they won like 13 spring training games. So I don't put a lot of stock into it, and I wouldn't be worried about it if you're a Braves fan.
Yeah, for sure. They've lost some games, and they actually were part of the controversial finish that finished on the pitch clock and finished in a tie on the pitch clock. But I don't sweat the spring training play. Honestly, they've dropped a few games, but yeah, like you said, the Cardinals won a World Series after a subpar season in spring ball. So yeah, I don't sweat it too much. All right, so let me start heaping more praise on the Braves because you didn't heap enough already, right?
Right.
This does feel like early 90s. We're tooling up for a big run, right? And I was fortunate enough, and I was a Braves fan back in the day. My dad and I were Braves fans, and I've kind of diverted from that, rooting for small market teams, and then eventually I moved to DC, and I've just kind of taken on the Nats as, with Harper Strasburg. I've said that story before, but I was a big fan of the Braves. Actually, I think I've said this on the show before, but my windup when I was a pitcher was a 100% carbon copy of Greg Maddox's windup. I kid you not, the hand over the head, everything, the small leg kick, everything was a carbon copy of that because he was my favorite. As if that wasn't already clear. But this does feel like that, right? With Max and Strider, they've got that rotation that could be the best rotation in baseball. And oh, by the way, they've got 9 to 12 guys that can just rake the ball all over the park. I think they'll miss Dansby a little bit in the middle of the infield in terms of his range and his fielding ability. But I think Vaughn Grissom has an opportunity to kind of pick up the torch. And I think Ozzie Albies is now the captain of that middle infield, as you said, to pick, kind of carry what Dansby created there. They're so solid up the middle with Michael Harris playing center field a lot, potentially playing some corner outfield as well. It's silly. It is silly to think of all the different lineup and defensive combinations that they can create with this team because they just have athletes fucking everywhere, man.
Right.
Like Vaughn Grissom can play every spot in the outfield. Ronald Acuna could play the infield. Like they could just move guys all over the place and have speed, athleticism, A+ glove, maybe not A+, but plus gloves, and arm strength all over the diamond. And they've got one of the best defensive first basemen who cleans up a lot of mistakes by other players. As if Freddie Freeman didn't do a good enough job, they just replaced him with another guy that can. And in that lineup, 1 through 9, I don't want to pitch to. I don't know who wants to pitch to. So I say all that to say, I think we're going to get close. I think we're going to get really close. I don't know that we're going to get there, and I'm not ready to say that we're going to get there, but we're going to see its shadow this year. 114 for the Braves is where I'm at, and we are going to have record watch for the last 6 weeks of the season, and it is going to be so fun to watch this team down the stretch. Atlanta, 114 wins, running away with the National League, running away with the NL East. I don't know who's going to stop them en route to a World Series championship either. Honestly, is Houston going to be able to recapture what they had last year? I think they're going to feel the loss of Verlander. I know I talked about that. I don't want to spoil our picks for the season, but man, it's going to be really, really hard to pick against Atlanta this year. They feel like what the Dodgers were last year for me, and the Dodgers didn't do it, so I don't know, maybe.
Right. So Atlanta, welcome to your dead last minute.
Yeah, I know.
Early exit in the playoffs, shipping all your guys. Yeah, those long-term contracts, kissing bye-bye Rosinbagger's pod.
Yep.
Curse.
You got the jinx on you.
Yeah.
All right.
Podcast curse is a hell of a thing to try to spit out after 3 beers. I can tell you what.
All right. Let's bring this show to a close. Ty, what you got for me, buddy? Closing thoughts here.
All right, closing thoughts. You talked about kind of some of your fond memories with the Atlanta Braves and modeling yourself after a former Major League Baseball pitcher. And, I can recall growing up through my childhood, and we had 2 options on television for baseball. You watched TBS with the Atlanta Braves, or you watched Chicago Cubs baseball on WGN. And in a Cardinal household, a 162 Chicago Cubs game schedule was pretty much off limits. We didn't do it unless St. Louis was happening to play Chicago on that day. And there was a few occasions where we would cheer for literally anybody that was playing the Cubs and watch our Cubs baseball. But the good old days, as Pop says. And so naturally, I watched a lot of Braves baseball. And in watching a lot of Braves baseball, also picked up some certain characteristics from a certain baseball player who is really, really nameless, other than the fact that I've got a 1994 Topps card from second baseman Mark Lemke from the Atlanta Braves, if you can recall. A just overall, all-around utility guy that could play literally anywhere on the diamond. Was a carbon copy Jose Akendo. If position players could still pitch in today's game, he would do it and would love doing it. The love of the game that Lemke had is the love of the game that I think and hoping that we're starting to see with today's day and age. And we mentioned Jazz Chisholm, and you mentioned Timmy Trumpet, and you mentioned the flair and everything that these young athletes are bringing to the table for an entirely new generation of fans. And it just strikes home that we talked about Greg Maddux and Mark Lemke, and 2 players that we modeled our baseball careers off of. Obviously not to the success of the major league level that they had, but 2 guys that we took notice of. And now the kids are taking notice of this flashy flair generation, and it's all about fun. And these kids are going to go to the ballpark every damn day this summer, and they're going to have fun. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing that any baseball fan can ask for.
I appreciate that, and I'm going to double down on it, bud, because I recently had a conversation with another pretty big baseball fan, and he's not a fan of the pitch clock. And I had a conversation with him about the fact that it's not so much about the idea of the length of the game, right? And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago in terms of what the pitch clock actually means for the game of baseball. And you're talking about the fun factor, right? I'm going to double down on the fun factor, and we're talking about the fun factor basically in second gear, right? We're moving at a much better pace. Now, a game can go 4 hours, right? If a game goes 4 hours, but we've got action, we've got the game moving along, we've got guys putting balls in play. If the shift ban creates more action on the base paths, then I think we're at a point where we're starting to attract a fan base that has been, for the better part of 20 years, evaporating, honestly. And I know there's examples brought up, but I'm gonna be completely honest. If Game 7 of the World Series ends on a pitch clock violation because the batter couldn't get in the box or the pitcher couldn't get on the mound and pitch, I'm not gonna be super sympathetic, honestly. And I've said that several times. Get on the bump, throw the ball. Get in the box, hit the ball. The game of baseball is very exciting when the ball is in play. And this initiative by Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred has not done many things well as the commissioner of Major League Baseball. But if the ball is going to be in play more frequently than we've seen over the last few decades, I think you're absolutely right, Ty. We are going to attract a fan base that is going to enjoy just how fun the game of baseball is on the backs of guys like Jazz Chisholm, Ronald Acuna, and all these flashy flair. This generation has a lot of excitement and athleticism, and the more we can put that on display instead of time between pitches, the better the game is going to